So I grew up in a house with a record player in the living room. I've actually never thought about this until this moment, but my dad loved to listen to music. He wasn't around a lot. I didn't see him a lot. He was working his butt off for his family, and he was kind of a grumpy kind of blow top guy when he was younger. He worked so hard. He'd get home and it was like, leave me alone. But when music was on, he was a different person. When music was playing, he would get softer. So my memories, I really think my love of music early in life is that when I heard music, I knew that would kind of tame the savage beast. And I've never thought of this until this moment, but I really think it tamed him, and it gave me comfort. So I think I ended up at a very early age really just loving music. My mom and dad thought it was very important when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. I was a baby. I think if I'm correct, it was February of 1964, which would put me at about 7 or 8 months old. So they put me in front of the TV with my two bigger brothers because they were like, this is a historical moment. It was, such a huge deal. So I watched the Beatles when I was that little. Of course, I have no memory of it, but I watched them on Ed Sullivan. So there was a lot of Beatles in the house. My dad bought the Beatles record, Meet the Beatles, when it came out, and that was a staple in our home. He also bought the Monkees albums, which I love those. So I really had a love for music. But the first band that I really considered like, I love this band, it's a little embarrassing to say, but not really. I'm really not embarrassed. The Partridge Family. I was at that perfect age where I think they came out in 71, 72. So I was 7, 8 years old. And my oldest brother, got the first Partridge Family record with I Think I Love You. You guys all know that. That was the hit song on it. And he got that for his birthday. And my brother was about 4 or 5 years older than I am. So he got that. He was about 11. I was like 7 or 8. And when he got that, I started listening to it, and it just hit me like I just loved it. It was perfect for my level at that age. So I grabbed the record. It basically became mine. I kind of stole it from him. He was fine with that. He moved on to like the Fifth Dimension and stuff. So I listened to that Partridge Family record so much that when their next album came out, it was like, Mom, please, can I? And my parents were poor. Not like dirt poor, but definitely like low middle class. And didn't have a lot of money at all. But my mom was very sweet. Like, when I really loved something that wasn't a lot of money, back then I think albums were like $3, maybe $4, but she would buy me the album. And she ended up buying me all the Partridge Family albums as they came out. And many years later, when I was a musician mixing and stuff, somebody said to me, how do you mix so well? Like, because I wasn't trained at all in it. I would just kind of did it on my own. They're like, how do you mix so well? And I really do credit it to listening to music as a child on headphones. I always loved to listen on headphones, that critical listening. And I didn't know that's what it was, but I remember thinking about the placement of instruments. The guitar is a little over here in my ear. The bass is in the middle. The drums are kind of here, but the toms are here. And I don't know if I consciously thought it back then. I probably didn't. But when I started mixing, I had this natural thing of listening, of putting things in the right place. So I credit the Partridge Family. A lot of people don't know that the Partridge Family had like the hippest California musicians, session musicians, studio musicians. They were like the hippest ones. And Wes Farrell was like a really hot producer back then. He was producing all their records. So it was really good musicianship. It wasn't the goofy little Danny Bonaducci playing bass. They were good musicians. So to this day, I'll put them on sometimes. But that started my love for music as a child. I just loved it. So in vain with the Partridge Family thing, one day I looked at David Cassidy on an album, back of an album, and he was holding a microphone singing. And my mom said to me at some point near that time, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I remember thinking about that picture. I'm like, I want to sing. I want to do what David Cassidy does. And she was like, oh, okay. Then I went through periods of, wanting to be a baseball player and wanting to be a ventriloquist. I was obsessed with the little ventriloquist dolls, but a problem is I couldn't talk without moving my lips, so that was out of the question. I was too lazy to figure out how to do it. So it's like, 1976, 77, and I have an uncle who is a musician in New York City. He's a guitar player, long hair. Ever since my youngest memories were him talking about playing in bands and stuff, and it was the hippie generation. He was so cool. I just hero worshipped him. And one day he came over and he's playing guitar, and we didn't see him as much because he lived about a 90-minute drive. He lived in New York City. We were in the middle of Connecticut. But we'd see him a couple times a year. And one time he came over, and I was in 7th grade. And he said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I think I want to be a baseball player, which wasn't going to happen. And he said, you need to play guitar because that's what the girls like. And the second he said that, I was brutally shy as a kid. I mean, brutally shy, but I did like the girls. And I thought, well, that's an easy way to get the girls to like me. I'll play guitar and then they'll like me. So I'm like, sounds like a good idea. So I said to my mom, I picked up the newspaper has those little advertisements for the local stores. And before the days of Walmart, in Connecticut, there was like Caldors and Bradley's and Zayre's. And I picked up this little brochure in the newspaper, and it was Bradley's. And there was a guitar in there for $12. It was a beauty. And I said to my mom, I have money saved up. I want to buy that guitar. And she said, oh, but Tom, like you only have like $12 saved up. You want to spend all your money on this guitar? You're not going to play it. Like you're going to grab it and you're just not going to play it. And I don't want you to waste all your money. And I'm like, but I really want it. And she's like, okay, I'll drive you. You can get it. So we drive to Bradley's. I'll never forget this. I was 12 years old. We drive to Bradley's, and the woman there in the little music department they had back then shows us the guitar, and I was like, I want it. And the lady said, well, I'll watch for you because I think you're going to do great. And I thought, I think so too. And my mom's thinking, he ain't going to play this. A few weeks later, I'm playing chords, and my mom really flipped out. She's like, I can't believe you're playing. This is so great. I'm so glad you got it, because I started playing then a lot. Fast forward, I enter high school, and I've got my first electric guitar now and a little amp, and I meet these two guys, Leonard and Chip, in high school, and thought they were like the coolest guys I had ever met. And they were, Leonard was a drummer and Chip was a bass player / guitarist. And they're like, hey, why don't you come over? We heard you play pretty good, and let's jam. Let's play together. I'm like, all right. Remember, I'm brutally shy, so I'm shy with everyone. So I'm just like this quiet, very quiet kid, and I'm really shy. All right, I have a side story. This is a really good one. There was a kid in school named Randy, okay? And he used to sit, those display cases in school, the big ones with the glass? Well, in our school, we had a display case that didn't have glass. So it was probably like a 12-inch deep into the wall thing. This guy named Randy used to sit inside that thing, and he was a stoner. I mean, this guy was like a stoner. He had, to me, the scariest eyes I'd ever seen. And he'd just sit back in this display case, and he would just he looked like he was judging every person that walked by. And it was like nobody messed with this guy. So I would see this guy, and every day I think that's the scariest human being I've ever seen in my life. It flipped me out. Randy flipped me out. I was so scared of him. So now Chip has said to me, come on over to my house, bring your guitar and we'll jam. And Leonard wasn't there yet because he was the drummer. We had to make sure that, we clicked and stuff. 9th grade. So I walked over to Chip's house. It was like a 5-minute walk from my house. Got my guitar. And Chip opens the door. And I didn't know Chip that well from school. I didn't know Leonard that well. We had just kind of all met. So Chip opens the door and he's like, hey, come on in. I'm like, cool, and showing me his house. I'm like, awesome, this is great. So we start heading up the stairs. And as we're heading up the stairs, I have this guitar in my hand. And Chip said, oh, this is my brother. and the guy was on the top of the stairs with his back to us, like putting stuff in a hamper or something. And all of a sudden the guy turns and it's Randy. And I'm just like, hi. And he goes, how you doing? And I'm like, I am petrified. I'm in Randy's house. I'm in his turf now. The scariest guy I had ever seen. I'm like, I am a dead man. I am a dead man. Turns out Randy, gave me a nickname, called me Sid for Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols because we were doing punk rock at some point. But he gave me this. And he I think to this day, if he saw me, he'd be like, hey, Sid. He turned out to be cool, but it was one of the scariest moments. I almost fell backwards on the stairs. But, Chip and I jammed that day. Everything went well. And then we had the first day where I was going to jam with Leonard and Chip. I had never played with a band. I was playing along to records. I didn't read music. I learned by ear, and I'm playing chords and stuff. So the first day comes, Chip and I have learned these 5 songs or something, and Leonard's there. And now we walk into Leonard's house. There was no scary siblings there. And we plug in the guitars and Leonard sits at the drums, and I had never heard Leonard play in real life. I don't even think I had heard him on recordings. So it was a moment was like, how does this work? So Leonard, we picked the song we're going to play. Leonard's like 2, 3, 4. And we start playing the song. And I can't explain like that first moment of hearing drums and a bass and I'm playing guitar and we had a mic set. Just that first moment, it was like, I was born to do this. Like it felt like I had found the hole and the peg just went in perfectly. It was one of my favorite memories of my entire life with music is that first moment, like the first 10 seconds, I was like, yeah. So we ended up playing together, and we weren't your average high school band. We were playing like, 3 to 5 chord songs, but we were really, really tight. And I have recordings to this day of how tight we were for a high school band. Yeah, so we were called Tums, and there's a funny story behind that. We had been asked to play at something called, they used to have a TV show called The Gong Show. You guys probably remember Chuck Barris, I think his name was, hosted the show. It was a pretty funny show. Well, a local high school, not in our town, a couple towns away, did something called The Bong Show, where they would have like all the talented people of the school, almost like a talent show. And because we were from out of town, somebody said, we think we can get you in, but you have to audition. So we auditioned at this thing, and we got into this local high school show, talent show. And we were so nervous. I was so nervous. Leonard and Chip had played together in like another band in 8th grade, so they had played in front of people. I'm the brutally shy guy who's never played in front of anyone. And Leonard and Chip are going like, can you do this? They're putting this pressure on me. Are you sure you can do this? You got to look cool. You got to move around. You can't just stand still. You got to. And I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. Okay. So, and then they had to tell me, remember I told you my parents were on the lower income level. So I didn't have Levi jeans, which were standard outfit that everyone wore then. And Leonard's like, so tomorrow when you play, I want you to have Levi jeans and a button-down shirt. Because I was the kid who, it's the late 70s. I had like, vertical striped pants and a horizontal striped shirt. And I didn't care. Like I didn't even know what Levi's were. So I said to my mom, I need Levi's. And of course my mom's like, we'll get them. And she went out and bought me a pair of Levi's. And I borrowed this button-down polyester shirt that was kind of reddish pink. So I had my whole outfit. And then I borrowed a suit coat from my dad that had black and white checkers. So I'm wearing this thing, and we get to this show. Leading up to that day, I was so nervous. I kept throwing up. I was so nervous to play in front of people. I was like, I literally thought, I don't know if I can do it. I was throwing up. We get to the place. We set up everything, and we're on. The second the curtain opens and I see that this auditorium fit like 800 to 1,000 people. So it was a really big high school. So the curtain opens and there's not an empty seat. And I am so nervous, and I start this song, and Leonard kicks in and Chip kicks in, and we're playing this song, and I am like bending my legs a la Elvis Costello in the early days, and I'm jumping up and down, I'm slamming guitar, and my mom is sitting out there. My mom and dad are sitting out there, and my mom said, "He's on drugs." She thought for sure somebody had slipped something and I was on drugs, because I was the quietest kid in the world and I really didn't give my parents any problems at all. And she sees me jumping and thrashing and bending my legs, and the guitar's loud, and we're just playing. I think we were playing a Cheap Trick song to open it up, and then we went into we did this punk version of Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. So we did that, and I am alive. For the first time in my life, I'm like, I have arrived. I am alive. So we're jamming, and my mom is like, my dad said my mom's turning white. She just thinks I am on drugs. My dad's saying to her, "Oh, leave him alone. He's having fun. He's not on drugs. Look at him. He's having a blast." And he was right. I had found it was like, as much as I loved playing that first time with Leonard and Chip in Leonard's house, playing in this show with all those people was the most satisfying thing I had ever felt in my life. So I knew what I was going to do from that point. The reason we were called Tums was Leonard always called me by both names, Tom Cote. He'd always say, "Hey, Tom Cote." And I'd say, "Why do you call me by both names?" He goes, "It just flows. Tom Cote, Tom Cote." He'd say, "Hey, Tom Cote, hey, Tom." And one time he slapped me in the stomach because he always said, "You're the skinniest guy I know." I was like 6 feet tall and 135 pounds. And he slapped me in the stomach and said, "You're the skinniest guy I know." And he started calling me Tums. I don't know why. He was like, "Tums, Tums, Tums, Tums." Always, "Hey, Tums, how are you, Tums?" So when we had auditioned for that Bong show and we had gotten into it, they had a clipboard and they said, "What's the name of your band?" And we hadn't named the band. We didn't think of it. And we looked at each other, and Leonard just said, "Tums." and I looked at him like, okay. And that was it. We were called Tums. And we heard the same jokes from everyone, "Am I going to need Tums when I hear your music?" and stuff like that. So we ended up, I wasn't writing songs for this. It was a 3-piece band, guitar, bass, and drums. Chip was writing the songs for this band, and he was like on fire. He was writing incredible songs. And he kept, every time we would think, they can't get better than this, he'd go, "I got a new song." And it's just, he was on fire in high school, writing incredible songs. And like I said before, we were a very tight band. We'd get up there and just, we played really well together. And I remember thinking, like, this is what I want to do for my life. This is what I want this band to succeed. We ended up getting a manager / producer who was this really hip guy named Wes, and he was running a recording studio, and he was going in and out of New York all the time producing bands. And he heard our tape, and he's like, "Whoa, you guys don't sound like a high school band. You're too tight. You sound great. I want to produce you." So our senior year of high school, Wes produced a tape for us. And, to this day, it sounds pretty good for what we recorded it on a little 4-track in a garage. And we recorded it live, not the vocals. We overdubbed the vocals, but we recorded all the music live. They were never like this free, so they tried to silence me. Who says standard is right? I didn't wear my... Funny thing is, 20 years after we were out of high school, I had a kid who would come over to our house, and my ex-wife would give him art lessons. And he was from the same town that I had grown up in. And he said, "Are you the Tom Cote that was in Tums?" Now keep in mind, this is like 20 years later. And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Your tape is circulating our school right now that you had done. And everybody's saying, this band did this 20 years ago. Listen to this." And I'm like, how did that happen? I never found out. He just said, "I got this tape." So I ended up making like 20 copies of a CD. And the fidelity was like triple the quality of what he had. And he passed that around, and I guess that entire year, like, Tums was a thing in the high school. 20 years later, I was 38 years old at that point, but people were listening to Tums, which is really funny. All right, I got another Tom story for you. So we get this gig at this place called the Fantasy Factory. It was on this old strip road, with the millions of lights and all the businesses and stuff. It was a strip club by day. We were like 16, 17 years old. So, and I am like the most innocent kid. Me and Chip walk into this place to fill out paperwork and come to the agreement of when we're going to play and talk to the manager of the club. And there's like strippers there. And I am just like, my parents would kill me right now if they saw me in here. They would kill me. And I'm like, why are we here? It's flipped me out. But we end up signing the papers. And then the night we played, by night, they would have bands. There was no strippers in there. So my parents came to that show. And we played this place, Fantasy Factory. And it was a great gig. I just remember we would play so loud. Leonard would hit the cymbals so hard that sometimes I would get nauseous. He laughs about that to this day. He thinks that's funny. But we were so loud and we rocked this little place. It was an incredible gig. We played a lot of fun places. We played, what was the place called? The place was called the Hot Tin Roof on Martha's Vineyard. We played there the summer after high school. We had a great time. It was a fun time. It was a great foundation for everything I was going to do in music after that. I can't emphasize enough how much my parents always supported me in my musical endeavors. At one point, Tums was done. Chip had gone to college, and I had always borrowed Chip's guitar. He had this old Fender Telecaster. It just felt at home. I would play it, and it was just my guitar. But it was his guitar. And about halfway through college, 2 years into college, he came home once, and he said, I need my guitar because I'm playing, I was a shy kid, and it was his guitar. And I'm like, okay. And I gave him the guitar. And I sat at the dining room table in my parents' house that night, surrounded by my parents and my 3 siblings who were all guys. And I'm like, I just had to give my guitar to Chip. And at that point, I was working, but I was getting minimum wage, and I had a few bills here and there, but I couldn't afford to buy a guitar. And I was heartbroken that Chip had taken this guitar, but it was his, so I understood. It was like, what am I going to do for guitar? Because I had a recording setup in my bedroom, and I'm like, how am I going to record? I don't have an electric guitar now. So when I said this, all of a sudden, it's hard to talk about this because I could literally get weepy. When my family heard that Chip had taken the guitar, dollars started coming out of their wallets. My brothers just started throwing 20s out, and my dad and my mom, everyone just started throwing money. And I picked up this money, and there was like $300. This was back in 1984, I would guess. And they're like, do you have enough money to buy a guitar? And I said, yeah. And they were like, good. So I went out the next day and bought a guitar. But I'll never ever forget that feeling of when you are so supported that your family will open their hearts and their wallets, just like, we love you and you love music so much and you're doing such a great job. That here, I could never repay them for that. Never. It was awesome. So, Chip had gone to college. Leonard was playing some studio work for Wes, that guy who had produced us in Tums. And Wes was playing with other artists through Wes. And at some point, there was a new record label that was being started by Wes, and he was looking for 3 artists to make a record, like a 45. And we wanted to do it. Leonard and I wanted to do it so bad. And Leonard said to Wes, Tom, you got to hear Tom's songs now. We can do this. We'll be the 3rd band. The problem was we weren't playing out at that time. We were like studio. Leonard would come over and play drums and stuff. We were just doing like demos in my room. And Wes is like, are you sure he's got the chops? Is this good? Is it good? Is it, and Leonard's like, yeah, it's good. Trust me, it's good. So we ended up making a demo tape for Wes. 2 songs, Circuit Avenue and a song called The Death. And Wes said, yeah, it's great. Let's do it. So we signed, we had to pay money to be in the label because we were all starting this label. So the 3 artists he chose, we all paid a chunk of money. It was very fair. And we came out with this 45. The only problem is the other two bands were gigging all over the place. So they were selling these 45s like crazy. But Leonard and I, we were studio guys. Like, we were in my bedroom jamming. We didn't have, and Wes was like, do you guys think you could sell records? And Leonard and I are like, oh, we'll sell records all day long. Our family, friends, don't worry, we'll sell the records. We didn't sell the records. We ended up with 1,000 records. I swear, I think we sold about 5, maybe 10. And I lugged around those records for so many years. I had boxes of these 45s that I would just lug around as I moved from here to there. And just like, I had them. And every year or so, I'd be like, let me get rid of it. I think each box had 50 records. So I had 20 boxes. Every year I'd drop a couple, throw a couple in the dumpster, try to give Leonard one. Nobody wanted them. So to this day, I think now I've still got, at 57 years old, I think I still have about 50 of those records. But finally I purged myself of the records. But it was a really fun experience. Leonard and I talk about it a lot, and we have a lot of laughs about, because we were the ones who went to the record pressing plant to pick up the records, and we have a lot of good memories of that time. So time goes on, and now I still have this relationship with Wes, the producer, and I'm writing a lot of songs, and we're making these really cool demos in a really high-end studio. And what I loved about Wes was I never play by the rules with music. I never learned all the technical stuff. So I would just turn knobs until it sounded cool. I didn't have the actual chops to do it by the book. I just did it the way I did it. And Wes had the chops, but he also had the creativity, and he wasn't afraid of doing something like turning a knob more than he should. So I have this memory. We're in this really, really nice studio. Back then it was a 24-track studio with a 2-inch tape. And we're in this studio, and this guy who owns the studio is a really cool guy, but he was by the book. And we're doing a song called We've Begun. And I want the vocals to be so compressed. I want it like Lennon compressed. And we're listening to the vocal with the song, and I said to Wes, it's got to be more compressed. And so he looks at the studio owner named Kirk, and he goes, Kirk, turn up a little. Kirk's like, I'll turn up a little bit, but we don't want to go past this because the clipping, and he's got all the terminology. And he's like, yeah, turn it. Wes goes, yeah, turn it up. So Kirk's like, all right. So he turns it up a little bit, and I'm listening, and I'm like, gotta turn it up more, Wes. Gotta turn that more compression. So Wes goes, Kirk, turn it up a little bit more. Kirk's like, we can't do this. It's not right. It's gonna and all right. And he turns up a little more, and I look at Wes. I'm like, Wes, can you turn the knob? And Wes is like, yeah. Excuse me, Kirk. Wes just cranks it, and it's just so compressed, the vocal, and I'm like, that's perfect. And Wes like, yep, that's it. And the guy goes, that's it. He was so mad. He was so mad at that we had turned the compression up that high. But to this day, I love We Begun. I love the sound of the vocals.
You dress like the sun. The glare hits my face. You know that we can be together.
So at this point, Wes and I are making demo tapes for record companies. And my whole dream, I spent all of my 20s, I'm getting a record deal. I wouldn't take no for an answer. It was like, I'm getting, no matter what and Wes was the same way. We're getting a record deal. We're doing it no matter what we have to do it. And in hindsight, we got really, really close. We got a number of times where record executives were sitting around Wes went and sat around a table with producers, and it was in relations to Geffen Records back then in the mid 80s. Back then they wanted to know, are you heavy metal, a hair band? I had hair then. I did have hair, but it wasn't, I had more close to a mullet, like the George Michael kind of a little hair coming back there. But I definitely wasn't metal. And then I kind of had punk tendencies, maybe the Clash, London Calling type sounds. but they couldn't pigeonhole it. So Wes would be in these meetings and they'd be like, we love his stuff. It was almost like they wanted to be told. Maybe in hindsight, we just should have said, we're this. But we were unique. We had our own sound. We didn't fit the Clash mold perfectly. We didn't fit like a Tom Petty mold perfectly or Beatles. We kind of had I had my own sound. And the deals would always fall through. They're like, we don't know what to do with him. And the other thing is, I wasn't a tattoo guy. I wasn't an earring guy. And they want, crazy hair. They wanted me to be that. And I get it. It's a business thing. I get it. But it wasn't me. And Wes would say, Tom, maybe you want to get like an earring and look more like a rock star. And I'm like, it's not me. Like, I was very true to who I was. And I was true to the music I was doing. And I just thought, if I can't get in by the music alone, I'm not going to play dress up. I can't do that. And it literally cost us record deals, they couldn't, it wasn't like there was an ultimatum or like, he's got to do this or we're not going to sign him. But I mean, it cost us record deals because I wouldn't change. I was who I was and I wasn't going to change. So we worked. One time we had a guy that contacted us who said, this is some of the greatest music I've heard come out of America in the last 20 years. And he had this long conversation with Wes. It was like an hour-long conversation. And Wes called me right after, and he goes, Tommy, we did it. I'm like, what do you mean? Wes always called me Tommy. He said, Tommy, we did it. I said, what do you mean? He goes, this guy has so much power in the music industry. He's flipping out over the tape. He just thought, he called it new American pop music. We had a song called Our Love.
I'm familiar with the smile, but I've never seen the face. 100 miles down the highway, but I'll never see the place where my baby and I talked all night, just trying to erase our love, trying to erase our love, trying to evaporate our love.
So the guy hears this song and he's like, this is new American music. This is like, I could get you, he goes, if I can't get you a record deal tomorrow in the United States, I can definitely get you one in Europe. The Europeans would freak out over this. This is the greatest thing I've ever heard. Now here's the catch. So Wes hangs up the phone, he calls me and he's like, Tom, we did it. This guy's got all the power. We did it. All our work, we had worked for years. It's like all our work is going to pay off now. We did it. And I'm like, oh, I was so excited. We never heard from that guy again. We never heard from him again. And this is the days pre-email, pre-voicemail. It was just, there might have been there was answering machines back then, but there was no technology, computers and stuff. And the guy, Wes would call him and he wouldn't return the call. We found out a while later that we kind of tied some pieces together, but we knew somebody who knew him. And I think what happened was he got so excited about the music, and I think he was playing it for other people. And when you play music that you're totally into, and sometimes you play it for a friend, they're like, I don't see it. I don't see the big deal. And sometimes you start questioning, like, maybe. And I think that's what happened. I think he had played it for somebody who he really trusted, who said, like, it's not doing it for me. But whatever it was, it changed his mind on what we sounded like. He never called back. So this is a side story. I was a straight arrow kid. I didn't smoke weed. I didn't drink. Everyone in high school was smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, and drinking. I mean, everyone was. I wasn't. And neither was Leonard or Chip. The way we rebelled against everyone was like, you're all doing it. We're cooler. We're not going to do it. And so I was a straight arrow kid. When that guy didn't call back, I got so depressed because there had been so many record companies that were interested and then dropped the interest that I said, I'm going to drink. You guys know what happens when you've never drank before? And my dad had this bottle of brandy. And my dad would have, a sip at night before he'd go to bed when he wasn't feeling well. So that brandy, who knows how old it was sitting there. And I'm like, I'm going to have some of that brandy. So I took a styrofoam cup, one of those white styrofoam cups, and I filled it like halfway. I'm probably at this point in my life, I'm 6 feet tall and I'm probably 160 pounds. All right, so I'm a pretty thin guy. I take this half cup of brandy and I just down it in one gulp. And I'm thinking about 30 seconds later, didn't do anything. So I take another cup and I fill it about the same. And I drink that and I'm thinking like that's probably enough to let me give it a few minutes. And then I hit the bed and I am throwing up, 10 minutes later. It was like alcohol poisoning. It was like I don't tell my parents this is what's going on. So my parents come home and they see me just puking and puking. I'm like, I have a virus or something. I was sick for 2.5 days. I was like sick. So I'm lucky I didn't kill myself. But it did teach me something. Like, I'm not a drinker to this day. If I have anything, maybe I have this much wine. I enjoy a little bit of wine once in a while. But I think that really taught me, like, I can't be that guy who drinks all the time because that throwing up, that was miserable. So it's really cool. So Wes finally got to a point where he said to me, Tom, I've tried so hard. I was now pushing 28 years old. And we both knew the reality that after you're 24, back then, I don't know what it's like today. I can't figure out the music business today. But at that point, we knew if you were past 24, 25, you couldn't be starting a music career at that time. You were getting over the hill, which is sad to say. But for rock music, country music's different. I've heard of guys in their 50s who become, a sensation. But rock music's a different thing. They want really young guys, especially then. So Wes said, Tom, I'm sorry. Like he was apologizing profusely to me like it was his fault that I didn't get a record deal because he knew how hard we were both working. And I was like, no, it's not you. It's just the situation. So we never got that record deal. And Wes said, I want you to go find somebody else who can help you. But I really got to a point at this time in my life where I was thinking like, I think I'm done. I think I'm going to grab my equipment. I always had a little recording studio in my house, always. And I'm like, I'm going to grab my stuff and I'm going to do a swan song. That's it. I'm going to do a swan song. So the local radio station, the big FM classic rock radio station, was doing a contest. And what they were doing was they were doing a production contest. It wasn't a songwriting contest. It wasn't about your musicianship or your song. It was about if you could produce, because they were giving away a Tascam 8-track reel-to-reel with a mixing board built in. It was about a $3,000 item. And I thought, well, what the heck? I mean, it'd be nice I'm going to enter this contest. So how they did the contest was they had you hide the cassette. You'd write the song in the cassette that was on the cassette and your name and your phone number. And they had somebody put tape over that or something so it couldn't be seen because they didn't want any bias. If any of the guys who were judging it happened to know the local musicians who were doing this contest. So they let you enter as many times as you want. And it was like $10 an entry or something. So I entered 5 songs. And they got a total of about 80 entries from all the local bands in the central Connecticut area. So it came the big day where they were listening to these 80 tapes. And like I said, I really tried to send like 5 different styles of the way I mixed and produced music at that point in my life. And I sent 5 tapes. So they had them all covered and they're all listening to all these tapes. And they decided that they were going to have 5 finalists. So they picked the 5 tapes that were the finalists. And when they opened the tapes, 3 of the 5 were mine. So they're like, this guy obviously has to win. And Wes knew the guy who was one of the main judges. And the guy had called Wes and told him the story I just told you. He said 3 of the 5 finalists were Tom Cote. And he goes, so he's got to be the winner. He goes, but you can't tell him because it's going to be announced on the radio. You cannot tell him. What does Wes do? He calls me. And Wes is like, Tom, I just want you to know that you were in the finalist, but they're not going to choose you, so don't get your hopes up. And I was like, oh, man, all right. So I get on the radio, and I turn on the radio that night that they're going to announce the winners of this contest. And they said, all right, here's our top 3 finalists. And I'm like, all right, was I number 3? Was I number 4? I didn't know that out of the 5 that they took 3 of my songs. So I just knew he had said I was a finalist. So I thought, all right. She said, the woman DJ was like, number 3. And they play this artist. I'm like, wow, I was number 2. That's nothing. That's good. I'm happy. That's really nice. Then they go number 2 and they announce another artist. I'm like, I thought I was a finalist. That's why I'm listening to this. This is really weird. And then they announced the winner and it was me. And it was really cool. I won this, this 8-track thing, which was super cool. And I thought, wow, I had done that tape as my swan song to say goodbye to music, but I'm getting this brand new, really cool piece of equipment. So I got to record a little more. So I get this piece of equipment. I start recording tapes. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, all right, I'm 30 years old. I've been doing music since I was in 8th grade and have never released anything, Back then, it was just starting in the mid-90s where you could self-release stuff. So I thought, I'm going to self-release an album. And I'm going to record everything. I'm going to play every instrument. Because at this point, I was really disappointed by waiting for musicians or auditioning up musicians. We had done it so much. It was so hard to find the right musicians. So I'm like, I'm just going to play everything so I can work at my pace. I'm going to write like 12, 15 songs, put them on an album. A lot of my songs tend to be shorter than the normal, so I could squeeze that many on. So I set out to record this record, which ultimately became an album I released called All the Young McGillicuddies. The McGillicuddy reference was the I Love Lucy show. Her maiden name was McGillicuddy, and I've been obsessed with that show since I was a kid. So I just called it All the Young McGillicuddies. I took a really cool photo of little kids with Vaseline on a lens, so it was kind of dreamy looking. And I had the time of my life recording those songs. I worked on it 18 hours a day. And I literally was writing songs for the album as I was going along. So I started the album with this song I had had a little while. Probably 3 or 4 of the songs I had had for years. All the others, I was literally writing them once I was done recording one track, I would think I need the next track on this album, and I was literally recording them I was literally recording them in order of how they ended up on the album. I was trying to feel. I love albums. I love the way albums. I think that's a lost form today. I really think today everyone thinks singles. It's not such an album world anymore. Back then it was, everyone liked albums. Like, you'd sit down and listen to an album. Now it's kind of like, oh, I streamed that song, I bought this song, and kind of sad. I think it's a lost art form. The way you would design an album. The first song on the first side had a certain feel. The last song on the first side had a certain feel. The first song on the second side had to have a certain feel. Albums had a flow. So I started recording McGillicuddy's, and I'm using a drum machine, and I'm trying to program it to feel real. I could drum, but I couldn't drum good enough for what I wanted this album to sound like. So I'm really going into the drum machine. I'm trying to give it a human feel, and I did pretty good. But drum machines always sound like drum machines, but I did pretty good. And I'm recording guitars and I'm recording the stuff, and I got this first song and I'm like, that's perfect. And then I'm doing the second song, and I was writing day after day. I kept writing, and a couple times I got stuck, but it wasn't for long. It was like 2 days later. I'd be like, okay. I ended up releasing All the Young McGillicuddies, a self-release in 1994. It did surprisingly well. I got big write-ups in the local papers. I got chosen to play in this show that was really big at the University of Hartford. It was called The Folk Next Door. They did it 5 or 6 years in a row, I believe. And that was hard to get into. They would get audition tapes from all over the East Coast, but I got in there, and it was right before All the Young McGillicuddies came out. So I did a couple songs there. So I got sales from that. Good write-ups. And what's funny? This album now is, 25 years ago, 26 years ago it came out, but I still stand by it. I would change things about it. There's a few things in there that are like awkward. I'm not a huge fan of aspects of it, but overall, I'm happy with All the Young McGillicuddies. Overall, I'm not embarrassed enough to like yank it from Amazon or anything. And then I released another album called Demo Boy, where I took all my favorite demos, because there's something about chasing a demo. There's something about when you write a song and you put it down as a demo, okay? There's a magic to it. It's because it's new and you have this approach that's demos come out so good. And a lot of times you get into a big studio and then you start playing the song and you miss out on the magic a demo has. One of my favorite songwriters named Jules Shear actually did a record called Demo-itis, where he talked about the exact same thing, chasing a demo. You get, sometimes demos have this magic, even though sonically they might sound like peeling paint. There's something about a demo. To this day, there are songs that I have great recordings of, but if I ever want to listen to it, which is very rare because I don't listen to my own music, but if I do want to remember what the song was like, I'll go to the demo before I go to like the polished thing, because there's something about demos and you end up chasing them and it's hard to get that magic back. Other times there have been songs that were demos that when I went into a studio, they actually turned out much better. But the rule, more often than not, for me personally, was the demos always sounded better than my finished product. So I got to the point in my life where I kind of knew, like, I'm not going to be a rock star. I'm not going to pursue a record deal anymore. I was probably 29 years old, and I thought, I'm over the hill for rock music. But I wanted to do something maybe in the music field in some way. And one day, phone rings, I pick it up, and it's Wes, isn't it? It's always Wes. And Wes said to me, Tom, or he said, Tommy, I'm starting this really cool new adventure. It's a music library. And for those of you who don't know, a music library back in the day, basically today, it's hard to sell any music in a music library because music's free. YouTube offers tons of tracks as background music for your video for nothing. It's just included in YouTube. Back then, a music library, people would pay money to use music for either their TV commercials, the background of their radio commercials, or video production. You know, there was always music. So Wes was starting a music library, and he said, do you want to compose some music for the library? I can pay you. I was like, money's good. Yeah, I can compose. So I composed for the music library for a couple of years while they were getting it running and getting it very successful. They did a really good job. It was Wes and a partner of his. And I composed for a couple of years. Then we got to a point where Wes was like, Tom, we really need a salesman. Do you think you can do it? And we had a discussion. I said, yeah, I know I can do it. And went to his house, trained, and all of a sudden I became a salesman for this music library. And I did that for almost a decade. And it was fun. It was just talking about music. I was no longer composing for the library, although I did a little bit. But it was just talking to people on the phone all day, and it wasn't cold calling or anything creepy. I'm not really good at that. So it was good. And our music went all over the world. In fact, to this day, I still get royalty checks from the songs I composed in that library. And you know, our music was on the Tybo videos that came out in the 90s. They were like the rage. And, you know, after about 10 years of selling, I actually ended up being a third partner. So I owned a third of the company. And a year or two after that, we sold the company back in 2008. So it was a good way to work at home. I'm an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, I don't like working for anyone. You know, I'll work my butt off, but I like to do things where I can stay at home and work from home. So, and I've always been afforded that. Since I was in my mid-20s, I've always been able to work from home. So that's a really good thing. And always stayed in touch with Wes. When I first met Wes, I think I was 15, 16 years old. I was in high school. And he met us, and he met Leonard Chip and I, and he said, we're going to be lifelong friends, you know, and we've always been friends. I mean, to this day, I'm 57 years old, and I'm still friends with Wes. So it's a good thing. So what do I think of my music today? I stopped writing, I think in 2004 and 2005, I was writing for other artists, and that went well. But since 2005, I haven't written songs. And the funny thing is, God blessed me with the ability to write songs. And I really feel like I could write songs today if I wanted to. It's something that's just always there. But what happened is I've discovered that I love music now, and I can embrace music in a way now that I couldn't. When you're playing music, it really is kind of a competitive thing. you've heard the story about how Paul McCartney had heard Pet Sounds from the Beach Boys and all the stuff Brian Wilson was doing, and Paul, it revved Paul up. It intrigued him. It was like, Beach Boys, John, the Beach Boys are doing such incredible stuff. We've got to do something even better. And they came up with Sgt. Pepper's. And because there is a competitive streak in music, so it makes you're always analyzing what other people are doing, and you're thinking, how can I put out something cooler and this and that. Right now, when I'm not writing songs, I'm finding that I just enjoy music. I just love it. I don't really, I listen to more stuff than I ever have. There's some bands now that I listen to that I wouldn't have touched then. I was judgy when I was young. Doobie Brothers, when I was in the 70s, I was like, Doobie Brothers, no way, man. I want the Clash. I want the Beatles. I want the, now I love the Doobie Brothers. It's like, the older I get, the more it's like, give me anything. I love it all. And so I'm really just enjoying music. A major event happened in my life in the past 6 months. What happened was I went deaf in one ear, my right ear, in a matter of a week period, but really within a few hours. I thought, why did my ear just clog so much? I've had a history of ear problems, and all my uncles on my dad's side, they were all like, what? You know the thing. They all had ear problems. So it's something that runs in my family. But I went completely deaf in an ear. I think I've got 2 or 3% hearing in there, which means like I can't hear my fingers rubbing together right against, or if I touch this, I can't hear it. And didn't know what it was. I went to see an ear, nose, and throat specialist. I thought I was going to get the hearing back, and he looked at it and he said, there's a virus you can catch that just takes away your hearing. It's sudden hearing loss, and it doesn't come back. He said, you have enough hearing that we could probably put a hearing aid in, and I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to. And it was really, as a lifelong music freak, it's been a really hard adjustment because I can't listen to music the way I used to. I used to listen on headphones and really critically listen. Now the tiny bit of hearing I have in that ear, it's screechy when music's in it. So it's really strange. I went from always listening to high fidelity music to now listen to it like on a computer speaker or a television speaker, and I actually enjoy that more. I can kind of hear out of this ear enough to kind of get the joy, but it's changed the way I listen to music. And it ended up that the hearing loss was actually due to, I was diagnosed later with Lyme disease, and they have recent studies saying that Lyme disease, one of the things that can happen is sudden hearing loss. So it's been an adjustment, but you know what? I've got 2 arms and 2 legs, and I'm healthy, and I'm thankful, and I'll adjust. So I'm adjusting to that. So I've decided to make this music channel, Tom Cote Music, on YouTube, to share my love of music. I really decided, I really thought about, I was watching other music channels and watching how much people interact. And I thought, I want to have a channel where I bring out an album that I love, and I tell you like my favorite song in the album, and then I tell you like, in my opinion, the worst song in the album. Or sometimes albums are so good, like the worst song is just, I'll call it the skip song, the song that if I have to skip a song, this would be the one on the album I would skip. I think that's an entertaining way to talk about an album. And what I'm hoping from my audience is I'm really hoping they blast me sometimes, say, you're wrong, that song is great, or they agree with me. But I also want to know, I was so involved in my own music for so many years that I didn't really get tunnel vision on bands. I don't know everything about every band, but I know there's so many viewers out there that are obsessed. Like, here's an example, ELO. I'm in an ELO group, the Electric Light Orchestra, on Facebook. The stuff I have learned from the people that follow that group is incredible because they're like fanatics for this band. I was never like, I've been a fanatic for bands, but never learning every aspect. But I feel like when I show an album and tell you the best song in the album and the song that I would skip, I feel like somebody's going to give me trivia about the album. So I'm going to really dive into those comments and read about, what do you love about this band? What don't I know about this recording? Where was this recorded? How come the drums sound so great? Or how come the drums sound so muffled? Do you guys have theories? I want that back and forth because I really feel like I'll learn something. And I'm doing this channel simply for the joy of music, the joy music has brought to me. Because God is so good. I'm really into God. I really am into God, but God is so good, and God gave us music. And I really feel like I'm going to learn so much about all these artists that I've been loving my whole life. So I kind of plan on going through my entire record collection and just sharing the best songs and the worst songs or the skip songs in these albums that I've loved for so many years. And I'm hoping you guys will join me in the journey doing this. And I'm also not going to limit it to just talking about certain albums. Sometimes I might talk about a certain band and say, what's the best song they've ever released? Because I find that would be intriguing. If I saw a video like that, I'd be like, I'm on this, you know. Or what's the best album by this band? Talk about it a little bit and just have you guys talking back and forth. Or what is it about great guitar solos? And who is the greatest guitar player? Even though you can never answer that, but who are some of your favorites? Because I know some of my favorite guitar players aren't the masses' favorite guitar players. You know, we'll talk about that in future. I want to spit a name out right now, but I'm going to wait. We'll talk about that in the future. Or who's the best drummer? Why is this drummer so great and this drummer, you know? I just love music. So I'm hoping that you guys come along with me and we'll just have a great time talking about music and have some fun. So a little bit about myself and what's going on today. I am very happily married. I live in Central Connecticut. I have 3 stepdaughters. I have a daughter from my first marriage. She's beautiful and wonderful. My 3 stepdaughters are awesome. And my wife just had a baby 2 weeks ago. So I've got this little baby. So I keep telling everyone I'm the oldest new father since Abraham. You know, he was like 90 or something when he became a father. So, you know, I'm 57. When the kid graduates high school, when she graduates, I'll be 75. Fine. You know, every school has a kid who's got a little old man as a father. And you're always like, yeah, you ever see that kid's father? He's like older than my grandfather. That's going to be me. And I'm going to embrace that. Okay. I'm happy about that. But we're living life. Everything's great. We're doing this YouTube channel. My wife does a successful YouTube channel and she supports me in every creative way, which is awesome. And life is good. Life is very good.
Sky's falling down on me. Sky's falling down on me. Well, I've seen it in the movies, fell apart at the scene. And every time that I look up, I know it's getting closer to me. Sky's falling down on me. Sky's falling down on me. Well, I've seen it in the mirror. The moment seizes me. And every time that I stand up, I know it's getting closer to me. I know you're out there waiting for me. You know I'll be there waiting to see. Sky's falling down on me. Sky's falling down on me. Well, I've seen it on the faces, I've heard it in the screams, and every step that's taken throws me far from where I wanted to be. Sky's falling down on me. Sky's falling down on me. Well, I've seen it in the cities, in the streets, in the steam. And every time that I get down, I know the sky is following me. I know you're out there waiting for me. You know I'll be there waiting to see. I know you're out there waiting for me. You know I'll be there waiting to see. 'Cause love is an ocean, time is the sea. You know I'll be there waiting